So first thing here, I'm gonna talk about 5 different things kind of as a whole. Number 1 is inflation, the real price of assets. Number 2 is tenants and having to deal with other people, and most often not the best people. Number 3 is the cost going up while rents pretty much have to stay the same. Number 4 is flexibility. We talked about this earlier in the show when there was a question there about the 12 words. So flexibility, and then the worldwide market. So those are kind of the 5 themes that I want to be focused on today, and I'm going to dive into a little bit further here. But Joseph says, what can 1 Bitcoin do for you? In terms of what? Do you want to look at it? Do you want to take pictures of it? Or do you want to hold your life's energy there? Because what I'm going to show you right now, actually, we'll start with this. This is what 1 Bitcoin can do for you. It's the best place to hold your purchasing power over time. So that's essentially what I want to start with here. This is kind of the key. And this is something that I've talked to people, I've met with clients, and this is the thing that really pushes them over the top in terms of understanding Bitcoin, because you can see it. Most people feel it right now, but once you actually see it and see what's happened here, it changes your whole dynamic and your whole lens in which you look through. So let's look at this. Let's talk about where I bought in. So this is where I bought my rental house, 2015. The average home price in Canada was $413,000. The price of 1 Bitcoin was $380. And so this is what it would have cost me in Bitcoin to buy a house, 1,000 Bitcoin. I sold it right here. $2021. The average home in Canada was $688,000. The price of Bitcoin was $50,000. And that would have cost me 13 Bitcoin to buy that house. So you can see the difference here. And this is, I think, that most people can really relate to this, because they've seen the prices of houses go up over the last 10, 20 years significantly in dollars. And that's kind of the world that we live in. And that's the lens that everybody historically has looked through. They see that their house has gone from 413,000 to 688,000. So mine was about 200,000 and it went to, say, 250,000. So that's a pretty good investment. Plus, if you're doing things right, you should be making some money from your tenants. You should be paying down your debt. But that's if you look at the average returns over real estate, it's not really that high. So your price went from 413 to 688,000. But look at Bitcoin. That house cost you $1,000 or 1,000 Bitcoin back in 2015. And in 2021, it cost you 13 Bitcoin. And this is real estate, but you can look at any other asset on earth and use this exact same. If you measure things in Bitcoin instead of fiat, you'll realize what's happening here in the world. Everything is falling in comparison to Bitcoin. Everything. So that was, unfortunately, I didn't time it this well. I bought a rental house here instead of Bitcoin. So not ideal for me. That's what I regret, is even buying it. But I didn't have a clue what Bitcoin was back in 2015. So I'm not going to spend too much time living in the what if world. I'm just happy that I got out of it when I did. So that's the first aspect. You have to look at you have to measure things in Bitcoin. When you measure things in Bitcoin, it looks totally different than when you measure things in fiat. Totally different. So that's the first one. And probably the most important one there. And even realtors understand that. I met with a realtor 2 weeks ago, and she totally wrapped her head around what's happening here. House prices are going up, but when you actually measure it in Bitcoin, housing prices are going way down compared to Bitcoin. And so just stop right there and consider the conversation that we have leading up to this about what's coming in Bitcoin. So this is where it's been so far. Imagine what it's going to look like in 2 years from now. Because currently that same house is 11 Bitcoin. And it's going to keep going down and down and down. And probably in 10 years, you might be able to buy a house for half a Bitcoin. If this continues, if this trend continues. And I see absolutely no reason for it not to. So as Jason says here, your home didn't get 40% better. The money supply inflated by 40%. And that's what most people miss. Homes don't get more valuable. If you put a new hot tub in, or if you do a whole bunch of landscaping, you renovate your kitchen, you put money into it and it becomes more valuable. But just because your house sits there for a while, nothing changed. It didn't become more valuable. The money supply just increased. And that's the paradigm shift. That's the mindset that most people miss. And that's why I wanted to do this video today. So that's the first one, the actual cost of inflation, the cost of the money supply increasing, the cost of our governments taking on more and more debt and us having to pay for that. You look at there was a chart I saw the other day, and if you were born in like 1990 and I think it was 2005, and you look at the US debt clock and how much it says per citizen on there, it's like $220,000 of debt per citizen. And that's just on like the money that they owe to the central banks. That doesn't include the pensions or the healthcare or all that, the unfunded stuff. You're born into this world and you have $220,000 worth of debt on your back from your government. That's not a great place to be. And kids nowadays have been told that they're never going to be able to afford a house. And I agree with that. I don't think that anybody under the age of 30 living in the fiat world is going to be able to buy their own house. It's just not possible anymore. But if you live in Bitcoin, if you save in Bitcoin, if you earn in Bitcoin, that flips everything on its head. You're absolutely going to be able to afford a house, the nicest house on the block, if you're living in Bitcoin. So that's the first one. The second part here, and I kind of mentioned this already, but is tenants. So with a rental house, you have tenants. They pay your bills. The idea with real estate is that you buy this house, you take on some debt, you buy this house, you charge rent. That rent amount is higher than your costs. And so you have to find people to live in that house. And the tenants part of that is a big one. So if you looked at a spreadsheet, and unfortunately I don't have one available here, but if you looked at a spreadsheet of a rental house, it would say rental income. That's how much your tenants are paying you. Then you have your property tax. Then you have your mortgage. Then you have your interest. Then you have your insurance. Then you have your landscaping. You have all these costs and you have to set your rent high enough in order to make some money off of this. But what you don't include there, and what most people miss when they have rental homes, is your time. So if you have a rental house, you are the person who has to find tenants. You have to go through the trouble of sifting through their applications. You have to call them all. You have to call their references. If there's a lot of turnover, you have to do this quite often. So that's one aspect of it, is your time is not included in that profit and loss within real estate. And if you're somebody who values your time, that's a big part of it, right? That's a big part of it. And so looking for tenants, texting with your tenants, calling tenants, finding new tenants, all this kind of stuff takes so much time, and nobody works that into their profit and loss statement on their rental home. So you could have good tenants, you could have bad tenants, but you still have somebody on the other end of that that's totally out of your control, right? And so that's a problem. And that was kind of one of the main reasons why I actually sold my house in 2021, is because I saw what was happening. The government was printing money or taking on more debt, whatever you want to call it. They were just sending it out to people. People were quitting their jobs. People were just living off of the government. And I knew the costs were going to go up. So my costs were going to go up. The people living in these houses were leaving their jobs. They're getting totally reliant on the government. And who do you, oh, there's a fox in the yard. I should let Arnie go see him. Pretty cool. Anyways, where was I there? Government. So I saw two things happening at the same time. One of them is that people are leaving their jobs. They're going to have less income. They're going to be more reliant on the government. And with that, sorry, this fox is distracting me here. With that, what's going to happen? The government's probably going to start siding more with tenants. Tenants might not be able to pay their rent. And if you know any history between the landlord and tenant relationship, the government very much favors the tenant. And so if the tenant leaves their job, the stimulus checks stop showing up, all of a sudden they can't pay their rent. That's a big problem for me because I still have to pay all of these costs every month. And if my tenant isn't making those payments, unfortunately, unless I go to court and have this huge legal battle with the tenant, there's not a whole lot that I can do. So I'm essentially going to be funding somebody else to live. And that scared the shit out of me. So that's a big one. You have to consider your time, and you have to consider what's going to happen here with UBI, with stimulus, with government control, all that kind of stuff. It's just not, I don't want to be in the middle of that. And I turned out to be not 100% right, but things have continued on that trend. And I think they're going to continue even further as we go along here. So the flexibility part here, just a sec. I want to text Bridge and let her know that there's a fox in the front yard. It's exciting times out here. Fuck. Sorry. Anyways, this is the kind of stuff you see on a live show. Oh, it's gone as soon as I texted. Anyways, so that's the first part, or the first two parts, the inflation, the tenants. And the next part here I want to talk about is flexibility. I kind of touched on this already, but think about if something were to go wrong in your country. All of a sudden, like I said, Trudeau gets another term. I'm very unhappy here. I don't love how much tax I'm paying, how much carbon tax. We're on our 10th carbon tax by that point. And I said, I'm out of here. I'm done with Canada. I want to start a new life somewhere else. And think about how hard that would be if you wanted to cash out all of your rental homes, even if you only had one. There's a very long process. You have to go through finding a buyer, hiring a realtor, finding a lawyer, the whole process of actually selling it and getting what you think it's worth, dealing with your tenants, all that kind of stuff. It's a huge hassle. Whereas with Bitcoin, on the flip side of that, you don't have any tenants. You don't have to worry about any of that bullshit. But at the same time, you can memorize your 12 words if you're very much distressed. I would probably just put my cold card into, not my butt, but somewhere, and the government might not know it's there, depending on who's at the border. But you can memorize 12 words there. It's possible to do. And I could pick up, I could leave Canada. So very flexible. That's what you want to be, especially in times like these. The next one here is the costs. The costs of everything. Johnny says, do the show with the window in the background so we can see cool things like that. Yeah, when it gets a little bit nicer outside, I might start doing shows on the deck in the morning and having some coffee out there. I just think that it'll be a nice, we'll call it a vibe, nice vibe. And we can see different things like that. It's not every day that the fox shows up though. So over in Zap.stream, we got some people in there. Love to see that. We had Jose zapped 121 sats for the fox. It was a healthy looking fox. He's keeping the mice away out here. Crypto Heathen says for 300,000 in 2015, you could have gotten about 900 Bitcoin instead of that house, worth $61 million today. So if I would have been a little bit more ahead of my time, I don't love talking about what ifs though, but that is a cool comparison. Thanks for that calculation, Crypto Heathen. I'm going to give him a little zap for that. That was a value add for the show. Oh, my fucking Alby's on. It's locked. Sorry, Crypto Heathen. I'll have to get you on nostr. Send you a little zap for that. Okay. So Nick over there says the carbon tax keep going up and we have to pay GST on it too. It's ridiculous. And that's what I want to talk about here. Everything. Think about this. And this is kind of what I foresaw back in 2021 when I sold the house, is that I knew interest rates were going to go up. They were talking about it. It wasn't a big secret. Interest rates were going to go up. So think back to what I was talking about there. You got your top line, your revenue. Underneath that, you have all of your costs. So you have your property tax, you have your electricity, you have your interest, you have your insurance. As all of those costs go up, you have to increase your rent by the same amount. And you can't do that. You can't do that because of the laws between landlord and tenant. So think about how much energy costs have gone up since 2015 when I bought the house. Especially here in Canada with like 3 carbon taxes now. Think about how much property taxes have gone up since 2015. A couple months ago in this city that I own the rental house, they increased their property taxes by 25%. 25% in 1 year. So your energy goes up. Your property tax goes up. Interest rates. I had like a 1.5% mortgage on that time. Now, all of a sudden, if I were to renew it, it would have been like 6 or 7% for the mortgage. So my energy's up, my property tax is up, my interest rates, they're all up. And you cannot increase the rent by that same proportional amount. So what happens? You become less profitable. There's probably some people out there with a rental house right now that are losing money every month. And they're thinking that just because they're paying down their mortgage, their principal portion of that mortgage, that they're going to somehow come out ahead of this whole thing. So that's kind of the monthly costs. But then you also have to think about if I did really well and I managed things properly, I was able to charge enough rent and I was making like $200 or $300 a month off this rental house. And I could build that up over 10 years and I'd be sitting on a pretty nice chunk of savings there, right? Then you think about this. All of a sudden you need a new roof for your house. And since 2015 to 2024, the cost of a new roof has pretty much doubled. Every single penny you made during those 10 years of finding tenants, of taking calls on Christmas Eve about your tenants, all this kind of stuff, over those 10 years, you built up this nice savings account. Now you have to go buy a new roof with that. Or a new water heater. Or a new deck. Or whatever that is. You never get ahead in the rental house. The only thing I would say about this is that if you are somebody who, has a bunch of rental homes, your family's passed it down, whatever that is, and you have like a team of people who actually manage this stuff for you, like property managers, like maintenance guys, bookkeeper, and you don't have to really do anything. You just sit there and take the checks every month. That is something where this is feasible. But if you're somebody like me who had one rental house and you were hoping to have this as a retirement when you get to that age, that's kind of like your nest egg. It's a very poor strategy. It's a very poor strategy for those reasons. So that's the other part. What else we got here? A couple more things, just kind of to round things out here to further drive home my point. Is number one, stress. If you have an old house, an old rental house, the house I had was a beautiful house, actually. It was probably 120 years old. It was red brick, beautiful house. But with old houses, shit goes wrong. Shit goes wrong a lot. And so I remember, I think it was Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve, and I was out at a party with my friends, and I got a phone call from a tenant saying that there was a water issue. The sink was backing up. And imagine like you're just having a good time, you're living your life. I was pretty young at this time, but you get a call like that, and you don't have a whole lot of nights like that, Christmas Eves, New Year's Eves, and all of a sudden it's been completely derailed by your tenant, completely out of your control, ruined your night and your week and probably your month. And you're going to have to take all the money that you've been making from this rental house and fix it. There's a lot of stress that comes with rental house. Lots of stress. Too much stress. Also liability. If your tenant slips, maybe you didn't de-ice the step, your tenant slips, cracks open their head. Even if you have a corporation, even if you have good insurance, there's still going to be some very negative implications of that. And that is totally out of your control. Bitcoin won't call you on New Year's Eve. Bitcoin won't slip and fall and crack their head open anytime. So there's lots of liability there too. Even if it's, like I said, in a corporation or you have really good insurance on it, there are still things that can go wrong in the rental game, liability wise. The next one here is drugs and crime. In cities where the majority of these rental homes are, think about the crime and all the drugs that are happening in those cities. And if all of a sudden you bought this beautiful 100-year-old house, a brick house, and this actually happened to me. You bought this nice house, and all of a sudden there's a couple houses, a couple people move in down the road, start selling heavy drugs. And then the next house beside them starts selling heavy drugs, and they're making these drugs in their house. And when you have houses like that, it attracts people. And all of a sudden, this nice little neighborhood that you had turns into a nightmare for your tenants. They moved in. They thought that they're, pretty close to a school, decent neighborhood. And all of a sudden, there's some drug houses that take over. That has a very negative impact on your tenants. They're probably going to move out. You're going to have to fight hard to find new tenants. All your costs are going up. All your costs are going up. So you're going to have to increase your rent to coincide with those costs. So even though your neighborhood has gotten shittier, you have to charge people more for the rent. All of these things happening at the same time is my literal nightmare. So, I would just love somebody to, and I'm sure that there are people out there who have rental homes, and I would love to hear a good argument in terms of why you would rather have a rental house deal with all this bullshit instead of owning Bitcoin. And then if you ever go to sell that, there's a worldwide market for Bitcoin. Most people get into real estate. They want to keep it for 10, 15 years, cash out. That's their retirement. Decent strategy. But if you look at all this stuff in behind the scenes there and how much our money supply is increasing, how much our debt is increasing, might not be that great. But at the same time, if you hold on to Bitcoin and you want to cash that out and retire, you have an entire worldwide market who's going to want to buy that Bitcoin. You don't have to find somebody to buy your drug house. You don't have to find anybody to buy it. You have a worldwide market who's going to buy your Bitcoin. BlackRock will probably buy your Bitcoin. And if you're smart, you will never sell that Bitcoin. You'll take on debt. You'll use it as collateral. Maybe you'll buy your own vacation home with that Bitcoin that you've accrued through the years. All of a sudden, you bought it back in 2024, 2034 rolls around, you're looking to retire. That the Bitcoin has gone up 100 times, let's say that, and you want to go take on some debt at the bank. Think about the bank's perspective here. And this is where I want to end it. So when you take on a loan at the bank, and historically farmers have been the ones who have really, Jose over in the Zap.stream chat says Bitcoin never cooks meth. It's funny, but it's really not funny. We're in a very sad spot right now in the world, and cities are getting worse and worse. So Nick said he used to pay $1,200 per year in property taxes in Calgary. Now he's at almost $3,000. That's significant for when you're trying to live for one, but when you're trying to make money off of a rental house, that is significant. That's double, triple almost. I doubt that you can increase your rents by triple. So this is where I want to leave it. This is where I want to leave it because this is important. Farmers have mastered the strategy. They buy land. They never sell that land. They pass it on generations. They never sell the land. Every time they want to buy something, though, whether that is a vacation home, whether that's a new truck, they don't sell a sliver of their land to go buy it. They go to the bank, they take out a loan, and they use that land as collateral. Bitcoin is the 2024 version of land. It's the digital scarce land. So you do the exact same thing. You're never going to sell your Bitcoin. And because of that, the reason why I think that banks will actually be very friendly to Bitcoin lending is because from their perspective, when banks lend you money, they assess your risk. Are you going to be able to pay off the debt one day? Are you going to be able to make your payments on a monthly basis? If not, what do? They come and take your land. If you can't pay your loan payments, they come and take your land. So now the bank went through all this trouble. They seized your land. Now they have to sell this. They have to sell that land. They have to find a buyer. They have to find a realtor. They have to find a lawyer. It takes months to do. Maybe there's not a whole lot of demand. Maybe you're going away from land, but into real estate. Maybe your rental home has been consumed by crime, drugs, and all of a sudden they have a very hard time selling this house for what it's valued at on the mortgage. Flip that on its head and you got Bitcoin. You stop making your loan payments. They just take some of your Bitcoin. And are they going to have to hire a lawyer? Are they going to have to hire a realtor? Are they going to have to wait 3 months to sell it? Nope. They can flip it over the next day because there's a worldwide market for it and it's a very liquid asset class. So, I mean, it just makes sense. It just makes sense. And when things make sense, you go towards that. So, a couple things I want to end with here. We got some questions in the chat. I really didn't want this to be this long of a chat today, but it happens. There you go. Jason says, my accountant just suggested us to consider our city home before things really derail. If you are somebody who has a rental house right now, just think logically. Think logically. If your term's coming up here in Canada and all of a sudden you had a 2% mortgage and it goes to a 6 or 7% mortgage, what do you think is going to happen to the value of that house? When less people can afford homes, there's less demand. And when there's less demand, house prices fall. It's very simple. It's just that most people don't really take the time to think about it. Yeah, and Rock and Roll says, all that stress for your well-being, it takes a very negative impact on your life. Anytime you have stress in your life, it has a very, very negative impact on your life. Freedom Perspective, that's a new face in the chat. Real estate was the place to park our currency. Now I park my currency in Bitcoin and I park the Bitcoin in my head. That's a great comment. Bitcoin collateral introduced the possibility of self-repaying loans. I mean, if you look at the history of Bitcoin and how much the purchasing power has increased, about 150% annually, and you look at your rental home returns, I don't know what it would be, but it's getting lower. It's the housing prices will not continue to go up because less people will be able to afford it when interest rates are higher. Like I said, this isn't very hard to figure out. Bitcoin is digital monetary money. Bitcoin is digital land too. That's what I like to compare it to. Daniel over in Zap.stream says, converting a rental home into Bitcoin seems like a no-brainer. I would just love for somebody to have a viable, and maybe somebody in the comments, maybe a realtor. Actually, I forgot to start the whole show with this. This is what I wanted to start with. Where is this? Because this is what Google has to say about it. Let's just Google it instead of looking for that. Google versus rental home. Oh no, that's not what I wanted. Okay, where is this? Oh, wait, we're I was gonna do a living in the future show today, but we might have to bump it to tomorrow. This has gone on longer than I thought it was going to. So here is what I wanted to read you. This, when I Googled Bitcoin versus real estate or Bitcoin versus rental homes this morning, this is what it says on Google. The very first little blurb that they have there. The bottom line is that crypto, not Bitcoin, the bottom line is that crypto is a high risk speculative investment. It could make you a millionaire, or it could implode, causing you to lose everything. Real estate, on the other hand, is the tried and true means of building wealth and comes with many benefits that crypto simply can't match. That's from Google. So when the average person, if somebody out there with a rental home types that into Google, maybe should I sell my rental home for Bitcoin? That's what they see. High risk speculative asset. It could implode, causing you to lose everything. Real estate, on the other hand, is the tried and true means of building wealth and comes with many benefits that crypto simply cannot match. And I think that that's where a lot of people live in that world still. So if you are somebody who has a rental home, I mean, I would love to hear a good argument on why you should keep a rental home over Bitcoin. I would love to hear an argument for that. If you're somebody who's watching this now, leave a comment in the YouTube channel and let me know why real estate, you think that holding a rental home is better than Bitcoin right now. I'm open to it. I'm very open to what people think about it. People get really emotional because they can see rental houses. They love being able to feel things in their hands. So they just completely ignore all the stuff that we talked about today. And it's sad. A lot of people are going to get very, very much burned from it in the future. So what I would say is that if you are somebody who has a rental home, you don't have to go list it today. But I do want you to take a very hard look at where you're at in your cycle in terms of what's your interest rate? Where are you in your term? Like, are you going to go from a 2% interest rate to a 7% interest rate in a year from now when your term comes up? If the answer to that is yes, you have to do a very in-depth look at what kind of impact that's going to have on your profit and loss, because you're going to be paying more interest and less of a premium on or less of principal on your mortgage. At the same time, also look at your capital costs. So your roof, when was your roof last replaced? Are you going to have to replace your roof in the next 5 years? And so if your mortgage is coming up, if your interest rate's going to go up and your roof's going to have to be replaced, probably is a very good time to be selling your rental home for Bitcoin. Plus, you also have to consider where we are in the Bitcoin cycle in terms of what's coming with the halving, what's coming when the grayscale runs out of Bitcoin, and what happens when the majority of financial advisors wake up to what's happening in Bitcoin here and start telling their clients to buy Bitcoin. So take a look at where you're at. This is what I'm going to offer to you. Find a way to contact me. All the information is in the description below here. Find a way to contact me. Let me know what your situation is. I'll try to give my best idea or strategy for maybe how to proceed with that. I don't have any sort of real estate credentials or financial advisor credentials. I do work very close with a financial advisor, so I would definitely loop him on it in terms of tax planning for it. I was a CPA in my past life, so I do have some knowledge on that. But if you are somebody, this is my offer to you. Just shoot me an email in a one paragraph. Let me know what your situation is. And we can either set up a call. I can put you in touch with the financial advisor that I work with, and we can just determine the best strategy for you moving forward. Pretty simple. Pretty simple.